I'd like to give you a quick overview of type anatomy because you need to understand some things about what we call these different parts of type in order to use it effectively. Body height. When we talk about type size, we are talking about the body height, and the body is everything that fits on the body that is the type, which could be the capitals, the lowercase, the parts of the lowercase that go below the baseline, anything going above the baseline, any accents, all of this has to fit on the type body. So a 12-point type, everything fits on the 12-point type body. The actual size of the capital is not 12-point because there has to be room on the type body also for anything that goes above the capitals and anything that goes below the baseline. The M space, or mutton, they called it a mutton because sometimes in a noisy letterpress printing department, you couldn't hear across the room. So if you needed somebody to get you a mutton, an M space to put into something, you would holler across the room for a mutton because M and N sound too similar, but mutton and nut sound different enough that you'll get the right piece. An M space is a space that is as wide as the type body is tall. Now this illustration is a bit misleading because I told you that these lines up here were the type body, but actually that's a bit farther than the type body would be. An M space is a space that is as wide as the type body is tall. It is not the archaic definition that it is the width of a capital M, because that would only apply to certain fonts. It is the basis for digital design of type. Everything is based on a specific M. An N is exactly half of an M. Side bearing refers to part of the type body beyond where the letter is to ensure that they space consistently. If you don't have side bearing on letters, then you might run letters too close to each other sometimes and get irregular looking spacing. So that's accounted for in the design of the type by the side bearing. Baseline is the line that all of the type sits on. Think of it as the ground, and the letters grow up from the ground, or they grow up from the baseline, and some of them go below the baseline. So it's like this is a tree, but this one has roots. It's not a perfect analogy, but you get the idea. Cap line refers to a line that goes through the top of all of the caps. And here we go back to what I was explaining to you about optical phenomena when we were working with the square, circle, and triangle. Notice that the curved letters, like the Q, goes above the cap line, it goes below the baseline. If it didn't go above the cap line and below the baseline, it would appear to be smaller than the E. But by going above, it looks consistent in size. The same for lowercase letters. Curved parts of letters go above the X height and below the baseline. Cap height refers to the height of the capitals. The height of the capitals, or the cap height, is never the same as the body size. Mean line, or median, or X height. This refers to the visual weight of the lowercase letters as judged by the lowercase x. So it's a line you could draw across the top of the lowercase x, and the baseline goes across the bottom of the lowercase x. So that space in there is the X height. The curved part of a lowercase letter goes slightly above the X height, or the median line, and slightly below the baseline. The ascender line, anything that goes up from the X height is an ascender. Ascender line is the limit of ascenders. You can see that it is higher than the cap height, and this is usually true, that the ascenders in typefaces are quite often larger or go higher than the cap height. Descender line, that is the limit of the parts of the letters that go below the baseline, or descenders. Letters have stem strokes. This is the stem stroke of a capital E. This is the stem stroke of a capital N. Everything else is attached to the stem stroke. Because this is like a plant analogy, you've got the ground plane here, this is the ground, and then this is the stem, but these aren't limbs. Well, they are limbs. They're limbs in terms of like human limbs. They are either arms. The E has arms. The K has one arm. It has a leg. And then you have bars or crossbars. Crossbars or cross strokes, which connect two main strokes. The Q has a tail. Some forms of serifs have a sharp point. We call that a beak. So that part's not human. That's more like a bird. Some serifs have kind of a little back turn where it goes down and then it comes back up again. And that little spike there is called a spur. So these are spurs. Sometimes the capital G has a spur right here, but this particular font does not have a spurred capital G. If two strokes come together going up, the top of that connection is called an apex. If two strokes come together going down, the bottom is called a vertex. A apex, V vertex. That should be kind of easy to remember. The area inside where two strokes come together is called the crotch. I don't actually have that labeled here, but you will find that in type textbooks. This space in here is called the crotch. And yes, trees also have crotches where limbs join the trunk. Curved parts of letters are balls, and thin parts, if you have a contrasting letter form where there's a noticeable solid stem stroke and then thinner lines attached to it, those thinner parts are called hairlines. And then you see a diagonal line through this capital O. This is the stress of the letter. Letters may be designed with some stress, a little stress, or a lot of stress. And the stress represents, if this was drawn with a pen by a calligrapher, they would start by putting the pen here and coming around and ending there, and then go back to the top and come around here and go down to there. And what angle this is at may depend on the shape of the nib of the pen plus the angle of the hand to the paper. And that gives us the stress of the letter, the stress of the design of those glyphs. A few more parts. The capital S, well, an S, an uppercase or lowercase s, has a spine. And why is it called a spine? Well, it looks like a spine. The end of a stroke is a terminal, and some terminals may end in a ball or other shapes. This is a ball terminal. There are other terminal shapes, but this particular example is a ball terminal. Lowercase letters and capital letters all have serifs if they are a serif typeface. The serif is a finishing flourish at the end of a stroke. This is a bowl. A rounded part of a letter is a bowl. If they join the stem stroke, they may produce a hole here. This is called the counter. And actually, a counter is the open part of any letter. The M has counters. The U has a counter. These are open counters. The lowercase e has an open counter. The lowercase e also has a closed counter. So here in red, you see these are counters. These are all closed counters. The R, this is a terminal, and this is a ball terminal because this is the same typeface as the lowercase a, so they both have the same kind of terminal. The lowercase g has an ear. Nothing else has an ear, just the lowercase g. And in some cases, they're kind of comical looking, and they remind me of the dog in Garfield comic strips. Somehow looks like a cartoon dog ear. Where two strokes come together, there's something that links them, and that's called a link. So there's a link on the lowercase g, there's the lower loop, and the lower loop is connected by a link to the upper bowl. Shoulders are not listed here. Shoulder is this part of the M or N, and sometimes noticeable on the R. There's a bar and a crossbar. One of them goes across a stroke and the other connects two strokes. This one connects to a stroke. It doesn't connect to another one, but like on a capital H, the crossbar would connect the two vertical strokes. On a lowercase f, it goes across, it's just a bar. Here's the terminal or finial. The finial is how it ends. The terminal is the end, and the finial is how it ends. So sometimes this may have a ball on the end, a ball terminal that could be construed as a finial. Serifs at the end of a stem stroke, a smaller stroke, these may or may not have a bracket or fillet. Bracket or fillet is something that fills in where the two strokes come together. There's some different types of serifs. Serifs may be cupped, like in old-style serifs or Venetians from the late 15th, early 16th century in Venice. Bracketed, where they have an obvious bracketing to them. They may be hairline with or without bracketing. They may be slab. Slab serif is something that looks like a slab. It looks like a brick. Usually they appear to be about the same thickness as the strokes of the letters, or at least in this case, they're the same thickness as the crossbar. They're not the same thickness as the stem strokes. So cup serifs, bracketed serifs, hairline serifs, slab serifs, and that's type anatomy.